They say legends don't need to prove anything, but what if one decided to prove everything? The Spanish air is electric again, the kind that hums before a storm no one dares name. In a single phrase, Jorge Lorenzo has cracked open the calm of MotoGP, whispering a challenge that sounds less like opinion and more like prophecy. Marc Márquez should switch teams. No insults, no bravado, just a spark thrown into a paddock soaked in fuel. Since that moment, every garage, every radio frequency, every journalist from Madrid to Motegi has been haunted by one impossible question. Would Márquez really do it? You can feel the tension in the silence between sessions, in the way engineers pause mid-conversation when his name is mentioned. It's not just about bikes, it's about ego, legacy, and the thin line between genius and madness. The data says he doesn't need to change, the heart says he can't resist. Because beneath that helmet isn't just the fastest rider alive. It's a man addicted to the impossible, one who sees destiny not as a finish line, but as a moving target. Lorenzo knows that. He's seen that look before, the quiet hunger that doesn't fade with trophies. Spanish media call it El Desafío Invisible, the invisible challenge, and it's already splitting the sport in two. Is this admiration or provocation? A warning or an invitation to immortality? One sentence, one idea, and the entire MotoGP world is holding its breath. Because if Márquez ever dares to switch again, if he ever trades red for something new, it won't just change a team, it will rewrite history. And somewhere, in that unbearable silence before engines scream, every fan asks the same forbidden question. What if he says yes? When Jorge Lorenzo spoke, the paddock stopped breathing, as if every mechanic, journalist, and fan sensed that history had just changed frequency. His words landed like a clean apex hit at full lean, sharp, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Marc Márquez is the most complete rider in history, he said, and the air cracked under the weight of certainty. Cameras caught the micro-tremor in his jaw, that hint of satisfaction that comes from throwing truth into a fire and watching it burn. For a man known for surgical precision, this was an emotional detonation. Inside the press room, pens scratched furiously, translating shock into headlines before the echo faded. Somewhere in the Ducati garage, Márquez paused mid-movement, eyes narrowing, a silent pulse behind his calm smile. So that's how it begins again, he thought, feeling the old electricity that precedes every duel. Lorenzo's statement was not praise. It was a provocation wrapped in admiration, a riddle only the circuit could solve. The technical detail lost amid the chaos was that Lorenzo had studied Márquez's lean angle telemetry for Motegi, 62.7 degrees, 2 more than the bike's own theoretical limit. Numbers never lie, but they rarely explain obsession. In that silent data curve lay the real argument, skill measurable only at the edge of physics. The Spanish media framed it as a passing of torches, yet it sounded more like flint striking steel. Commentators dissected tone, posture, even breathing patterns, desperate to decode intent. Lorenzo had always been the artist of control. Now he was painting with provocation. The metaphor that fit best was not of battle, but of weather, a sudden electrical storm over calm asphalt, beautiful and dangerous, impossible to forecast. As night fell, social feeds roared, each comment a droplet merging into the flood of debate. The old Rossi versus Márquez polarity suddenly had a new gravitational center. Who is the GOAT became less a question than a chant, vibrating through every garage wall. Lorenzo knew exactly what he'd done, and that knowledge was his smirk beneath the fluorescent lights. The climax arrived not in his words but in their silence afterward, a pause so heavy it felt like the moment before the lights go out on the grid. And as engines cooled under metallic twilight, MotoGP understood it had entered a new era of reckoning, one defined by a single sentence that will never stop echoing. There are comebacks, and then there is what Marc Márquez did in 2025, a resurrection carved from titanium, pain, and refusal. For 6 years he lived inside the fracture, not just in bone but in spirit, each scar a reminder of how far he'd fallen from invincibility. When he left Honda, it felt like a funeral, for an empire, for a dynasty, for the boy who'd once made gravity obey him. Ducati was supposed to be his gamble, the last roll of the dice, yet from the first laps in Sepping the telemetry whispered a secret. The Phoenix was breathing again. It's not about feeling fast, he told his crew chief. It's about feeling free. The team nodded, knowing that freedom in MotoGP costs millimeters and milliseconds, both extracted with blood. The technical engineers noticed something subtle. Márquez had modified his rear brake input timing by 0.08 seconds to stabilize corner exit on throttle, an instinct no data could teach. He was riding like a man unafraid of braking again. If I fall now, I'll rise faster, he told himself, a private vow beneath the roar of Desmacedicii engines. Each weekend became a poem of velocity, brutal and elegant, with red paint and fear intertwined. The first win in Aragon broke him open. The tears behind the visor weren't for victory, but for survival. Commentators called it the return, but in truth, it was a metamorphosis. His body had changed, his reflexes recalibrated, his understanding of pain refined into rhythm. Watching him break into turn 1 at Motegi, the front tire quivering at 1.7 G, felt like watching a man wrestle with ghosts and wind. The metaphor that defined it was of light through cracked glass, fractured yet more beautiful for it. By the fifth race before season's end, the title was mathematically his, and yet he rode as if hunted by his own shadow. Every lap was an argument against fragility, every victory a sermon in resilience. Ducati's engineers whispered his name like a spell, half awe, half disbelief. The season closed under Japanese floodlights, the number 93 gleaming with a glow of something elemental. And when the anthem played, Márquez closed his eyes and thought, so this is what rebirth sounds like. In that instant, MotoGP didn't just witness a champion's return. It saw the human limit redrawn in red. Greatness in MotoGP has always been a double-edged mirror, one side glowing with emotion, the other glinting with precision. Valentino Rossi built his legend from laughter, yellow smoke, and theater. Marc Márquez forged his from scars, telemetry, and silence. When Jorge Lorenzo spoke of them, he didn't compare, he dissected. Rossi made you love the sport, Márquez makes you fear its limits, he said, and in that contrast lies the essence of the GOAT debate. Rossi's charisma was sunlight, warm and contagious, turning racetracks into carnivals and podiums into confessionals. Márquez's brilliance is electricity, invisible, violent, and impossible to contain. He was born to ride what others only dare to imagine. Márquez once thought of Rossi, half admiring, half defiant. The Italian was a storyteller in leather, his celebrations choreographed like folklore. But beneath that charm lay method, a rider who read the air pressure, the temperature of front tires, the emotional pulse of a grandstand. Márquez, by contrast, rewrote physics itself, his elbows grazing asphalt at 65 degrees of lean, a technical detail once believed impossible before his era. Rossi's lap times seduced, Márquez's assaulted. One moved hearts, the other redefined biomechanics. The metaphor is not war but art. Rossi painted in color, Márquez sculpted in motion, two artists sharing a single canvas of speed. Theirs isn't rivalry anymore. It's mythology, emotion versus execution, soul versus circuitry. When Márquez passed Rossi's record of poles, he didn't celebrate. He whispered, I still owe him the thrill. The sport needs both the dreamer and the dissector, the chaos and the code. Lorenzo understood that the crown of MotoGP is too heavy for one head alone. Yet history loves symmetry, and sooner or later, it will demand a single name. Rossi gave the world spectacle. Márquez gave it science. And in the space between applause and silence, MotoGP found its most human truth. Greatness isn't one story told twice. It's two stories that refuse to end. Before the lights go out, the race is already halfway decided, and Jorge Lorenzo knows it better than anyone. He calls it the invisible lap, the one that exists only in the mind, where fear tightens the throttle before the first corner. Márquez wages his war there, silent, surgical, unseen. I don't need to talk, the stopwatch speaks louder, he once told a mechanic, eyes unreadable under fluorescent light. Every time he lines up beside Pecco Bagnaia, something inside the Italian trembles, a delicate fracture of certainty. He's faster again. How? Pecco wonders, feeling the weight of half a second, an eternity in MotoGP terms. The telemetry confirms it. Same tires, same fuel load, identical Desmacedicii GP25S, yet Márquez exits turn 3 with 2 extra kilometers per hour of velocity, a small miracle of traction control finesse. The engineers call it micro-throttle modulation, a technique Márquez executes unconsciously, adjusting wrist tension by less than 1% mid-corner. That's not luck, that's psychological architecture. Rivals speak of him as if describing weather, inevitable and beyond reason. His presence erodes confidence, his shadow stretches across pit walls like a rumor. Lorenzo explains that no insult, no media jab, can match the cruelty of data. numbers that whisper you will never catch him. The metaphor isn't of war, but of gravity. Márquez bends the mental field around him, making others orbit his pace. Commentators praise Bagnaya's resilience, but even he admits, Marc rides as if fear never learned his name. In post-race debriefs, Ducati technicians review graphs in silence, knowing the truth burns brighter than excuses. Márquez smiles only once, helmet off, sweat tracing the map of effort across his face. The battle for him is not about victory. It's about dominance, the quiet kind that breaks men long before the flag. Every lap he rides is a psychological sermon, every turn an act of quiet annihilation. And as the world watches his rivals falter, one thought echoes through the paddock like static. Some riders race the circuit. Márquez races your mind. Every empire falls, but the wise never collapse with it. When Honda began to sink beneath years of technical inertia, Marc Márquez read the telemetry not as data but as prophecy. He saw the numbers flatten, the acceleration curve lose its voice, and somewhere inside, a whisper grew louder. It's time to go. That decision was not rebellion, but evolution. You don't win forever in the same color, he told his inner circle, his tone calm but final. Ducati didn't court him, he seduced them with proof, not promises. In 2024, on an outdated GP23, he performed miracles that bent the hierarchy of power. The technical detail most missed in that year's analysis was his input lag reduction strategy. Márquez had discovered how to synchronize the torque delivery 0.05 seconds earlier using traction mapping feedback, turning mid-tier machinery into a predator. The paddock called it witchcraft. Engineers called it genius. Jorge Martin, set for the factory seat, became collateral in a silent coup. Márquez met Ducati management once, eyes locked, voice low, red or nothing. That ultimatum was his checkmate move. Lorenzo described it as a masterclass in leverage, the art of making a corporation blink first. The metaphor that fits isn't war but astronomy. Márquez is a gravitational anomaly, pulling Ducati's orbit until alignment became destiny. In Bologna's headquarters, strategy meetings turned into prayers, fearing to lose both the man and the myth. When the announcement came, the paddock erupted not in applause but awe. It felt orchestrated, inevitable. Márquez had turned contract negotiation into a performance of dominance, one signature sealing 6 years of redemption. He doesn't join teams, said a mechanic, he rewrites them. His first laps in full factory red carry the aura of coronation, the weight of prophecy fulfilled. And his engines fired under Qatar's desert sun. The message was unmistakable. Márquez no longer chased power. He had become it. There are whispers in the paddock now, the kind that smell like destiny. Jorge Lorenzo's voice still echoes between garages. The dare disguises admiration. Win with a third factory, and the debate ends forever. Márquez heard it, smiled faintly, and said nothing. Silence is the currency of legends. If I ever switch again, it won't be for comfort. It'll be for history, he once muttered to a Ducati engineer, his tone balanced between temptation and threat. That idea has become MotoGP's forbidden prophecy, the notion that he might chase immortality beyond red fairings. Yamaha dreams of him like a lost lover. KTM sees him as a spark to ignite the revolution. The technical intrigue is real. Márquez's adaptive braking technique, known internally as phase delay compression, allows him to recalibrate to different chassis geometries faster than any rider on record. That alone makes the impossible seem within reach. Could I really tame another beast? He wonders at night, staring at the faint scar on his right arm, the reminder of both fragility and fire. The thought terrifies and excites him equally. Lorenzo knew precisely which nerve to strike. Ambition has always been Márquez's most dangerous fuel. Analysts call it madness. Others call it the next logical step in a career built on defiance. The metaphor isn't war but horizon. The further he rides toward it, the more it recedes, pulling him forward like gravity wrapped in light. Sponsors whisper, fans argue, engineers speculate, yet only Márquez knows the true cost of one more rebirth. The Ducati throne is safe, but safety has never interested him. What tempts him now is transcendence, a final act that could etch his name beyond eras, beyond metrics. 3 brands, 3 worlds, 1 rider, a commentator said, already tasting the myth. If he succeeds, MotoGP itself will need new language to describe him. And if he fails, even the fall will become legend. That's the paradox he lives for, the edge where legacy meets oblivion. The climax is not whether he'll try, but that everyone already believes he might. and belief in Marquez's story has always been the first spark of truth. There's a strange kind of quiet in MotoGP now, not absence, but anticipation. It's the silence that hums before thunder, the fragile breath between eras. Jorge Lorenzo's words still hang in that air, sharp and echoing, a challenge, a temptation, a spark. Change teams, Marc. Prove it one more time. He didn't shout it. He didn't need to. In a paddock addicted to noise, a whisper from a five-time world champion travels faster than any straight-line speed. Every journalist in Spain can feel it, that invisible tension, that sensation that something monumental is about to shift. They call it La Espera, the red weight. Because somewhere behind the tinted glass of Ducati's motorhome, Marc Márquez sits with his eyes half closed, listening to the hum of machines that have already carried him back to glory. 7 MotoGP titles, 9 world crowns, 541 points in a season of domination. By every measurable standard, he's already the best. Yet greatness is never content. It's haunted by the echo of unfinished symphonies. Am I done, or am I just beginning again? He wonders, fingers tracing the scar that still burns under his right arm, the same arm that once nearly ended it all. That scar doesn't hurt anymore. It reminds him he survived. And survival for Márquez is only meaningful when there's a new mountain to climb. The Spanish media spins theories like constellations, Yamaha preparing a secret proposal, KTM running simulations with his telemetry, Red Bull quietly dreaming of a new poster boy in orange. Ducati insists everything is secure, that their champion is untouchable. But even in Bologna, the engineers glance at each other when his name comes up. Because they've all seen it, that restlessness in his eyes, that hunger disguised as calm. When Márquez talks about the future, he uses the language of uncertainty, and uncertainty in MotoGP is a prelude to evolution. The technical world knows what's at stake. Switching manufacturers isn't a transfer. It's an act of self-reinvention. It means learning new braking maps, corner entry behaviors, torque delivery, weight balance, and chassis flex patterns, a symphony of sensations that only a few riders on Earth can decode. Márquez is one of them. His phase delay compression braking technique, his microscopic throttle control, his adaptability to front-end feedback, they make him the only man alive who could win with anything on anything. That's what Lorenzo meant when he threw down the challenge, not to insult, but to summon the impossible. If Márquez stays with Ducati, he'll keep winning. More titles, more records. The legend will expand but remain confined within red walls. If he leaves, if he dares to abandon security for the unknown, then MotoGP will enter a new dimension, one where history bends toward myth. Lorenzo knows this. So does Márquez. They've both lived on that razor's edge where fear becomes fuel and ambition becomes faith. And now the world waits. Cameras ready. Reporters whispering. Fans scrolling through rumors at midnight. Every hum of a prototype engine, every coded press release, every hesitant smile in a post-race interview feeds the storm. But beneath all that noise, the truth remains terrifyingly simple. Marc Márquez has nothing left to prove, yet everything left to become. So the sport holds its breath, suspended in that delicate instant before ignition. Because when Márquez decides to stay, to go, to chase the third brand and seal immortality, the ground beneath MotoGP will tremble. And until then, the silence isn't empty. It's alive. It's the sound of destiny revving in neutral, waiting for the clutch to drop, waiting for the man who has already conquered time to press start one more time.